I'm going to give you a rubric, rough rubric they can use. You'll score yourself, and you'll give me your score through iClicker. We'll see if it works. If it doesn't work, I won't do it again. That doesn't really help you, but I do want to at least try it because the other ways are not very helpful. Okay? So I think I got exams from all of you. If you didn't submit an exam, you're in trouble. You've had more than 24 hours to do it. A couple of you had various things happen, flat tires. In college, I had a professor who told this story. I'm sure it's not true, but he told this story that he once gave an exam right before spring break, or right after spring break. And a couple students said, "Oh, no, professor, we couldn't take the exam. We had a flat tire on our car driving back from spring break. We couldn't get there." And professor said, "Fine, I'll give you a makeup exam." You want to hear this story? Probably not true. So the makeup exam had one question for the students who all had the same excuse. Which tire was flat? They all failed because they made it up. But I've had every excuse you can imagine. One year, I went to the hospital. It turned out to be true. So anyway, I don't care anymore if you don't take it, right? I used to actually really care. If you don't, it's on you. But I do want to go over this today. I did notice, I'd be remiss to mention this. You guys come in late consistently. I don't yell at you anymore. I used to because I think it's a waste of time. But you came in late for the midterm. Some of you, if you were a few minutes late for the midterm, I was shocked. If you come in late for the final, you don't take it. You realize that, right? If you're a minute late, you don't take the exam. And every year I get at least one kid who screams saying, "Let me take the exam," with the poor secretary proctoring. And the answer is no. I know traffic sucks, but it sucks every day. So be here on time. There's not really an excuse. I don't yell at you for being late anymore because it's not worth my stress. I used to make a big deal about it for like middle semesters. But if you're late for a court hearing, you lose. Right? If you're not there when the court calls the case, it's a default judgment. You lose, and you have a malpractice suit. Punctuality is so important. It's really one. Nothing else to say. Be here on time. It's really bad when you come here late for a midterm. All right, I apologize. My YouTube's working. I can't load Zoom, so you have to just watch this on YouTube. So let's go over the exam. I have it on PDF here. You should all have PDF as well. Please all bring it up on your screens. Or if you can't, you can look it up here. See? I used to actually have a policy. I don't do this anymore because it got too hard to ignore, where I would leave iClicker open exactly till 9 a.m., then I'd turn it off. If you weren't here exactly at 9, I'd mark you absent. The reason why it didn't work was people would start checking from the hallway, from the elevator. So they would just lie, and I would never do enough to see who actually was doing it honestly or not, so I abandoned it. But be here on time. It's really, it sends a very clear signal when you walk in late to a midterm. It's not a good idea. All right. I think most of you are okay on finishing within 90 minutes. In fact, a lot of you finish early. Now, that could be the fact that a lot of you actually already done this exam before, which is fine. The reason why I give this midterm is not for the people who take this seriously, it's people who don't. If you took all of my old midterms and memorized answers, good for you. Right? I'm not worried about you. This is more of a wake-up call. It's true. It's more of a wake-up call for people who did not do this. And this is just indicative of how law school usually works. So let's go through the instructions one by one. If you can't see this, you should have a PDF in your computer. It's a little bit hard to read. And I cannot open Zoom. It's completely crashed. I'm sorry, there's no Zoom today. But YouTube. So the setup says you're a law clerk for the Chief Justice of the Hogwarts Supreme Court. If you haven't read the Harry Potter books, watch the movie. This is about Harry Potter. It doesn't matter if you read the book or not. It doesn't really help you. But I try to use something that people might be familiar with. It makes it a little bit easier to write. Memo, no more than 1,000 words. I haven't done a word count in your exams yet, but if you went over 1,000 words, I would stop reading. Please make sure you know how to use the word count in the exam solve feature. If you don't, run a test trial. I can give you instructions you won't remember. Do it yourself, right? I always give you instructions no one remembers this. So actually take a sample exam and do it yourself. I tell you in this question, the jurisdiction applies all American common law rules, which is useful because there's some cases this semester that have modern rules and common law rules. For example, can you assign a possibility reverter? Right? A common law, you cannot. In modern jurisdiction, you can. So you have to keep in mind what your jurisdiction is. And when I tell you, you follow all the natural law principles, I'm just waving a big red flag. It's going to be an animal question with hunting animals. You have to talk about the natural law theorists. Okay. I encourage you to read through the question front to back before you start writing a word. I know I was actually watching, so I was kind of curious. A lot of you started writing very quickly, which is probably a mistake. I wouldn't start writing anything until you're at 10 or 15 minutes in. The reason why is you're going to waste your time. You're going to start writing something that's not correct, right? You can't possibly start writing that quickly. Read it through, straight through. The reason hints and things I give you later in the question say, oh, that's what he was asking about, right? I often bury stuff at various points in the exam where if you sort of start answering questions, whatever I'm giving you guys for your advantage. Don't try and jump right into it. All right, so the question begins. In the Land of Hogwarts, we have three characters. We have Potter, Ron, and Hermione. They have three pieces of property. Potter owns Blackacre, Ron owns Whiteacre, and Hermione owns Green Acre. Okay. I tell you these properties border each other. That is an important piece of information because in this question, things are moving and flying around. The three of them are playing a game called Quidditch. I don't care if you've ever seen the movie, it doesn't matter. But contestants fly around on a broomstick. It's an ancient sport. I'm telling you this fact very deliberately to think of customs and ancient hunting traditions, right? The word ancient there is very deliberate. This is going to sound crazy, but every word is placed carefully. If a word is there, it has significance. I don't give you facts. Oops. I'm not trying to sort of trick you. Yeah, the camera angle is bad. For whatever reason, in the morning, the wireless is really bad. I can't get my good camera working, so I have to use my laptop camera. Okay. So they fly around on broomsticks and catching this snitch, which is a mythical flying creature. Again, by flying creature, that means it's a fairy nature, a wild animal. Okay, so this tells you immediately the animal cases are going to be relevant. And the rules say the first contestant to capture the snitch wins the match. This is important. I'm telling you what the custom is. Right? This matter does go to the courts, but this is a tradition, a custom. Think of the whaling case, right? Again, sometimes courts defer to the custom. And whatever the custom is, here, the first person to capture it wins. But of course, that doesn't answer the question. It doesn't mean to capture the snitch. Right? That's always the issue. All right. So this is kind of a really messy fact pattern. I encourage you, if you want to sort of diagram this out or just draw it out in your notes on scratch paper, you should, kind of like step 1, step 2, step 3. It helps. Because these hunting questions, I always ask them in very similar fashions. There's different people chasing the same object on different pieces of land. It's always going to be the very similar fact pattern. All right, so I tell you, the tournament begins in a public park. So this is sort of like in Pearson, where the tournament began on a public beach. That was the facts in Pearson. Okay. So first, the snitch flies from the park onto Blackacre. And the question tells us that I think Potter is the owner of Blackacre. Okay. Ron, the fastest flyer, takes the lead. His hands are within an inch of grabbing the snitch. So what is this like? In Pearson versus Post, the hunter was out in the lead and was very close to capturing the fox. Like the hunter in Pearson v. Post, Ron does not get it. As Ron's about to grab it, Potter manages to strike the snitch with his broomstick. So again, this is again like in Pearson, where at the last minute the jerk comes in and takes the fox away. Right? So at that point in time, who has a stronger claim? Well, it depends. Are you following the labor theory, which you probably give it to Ron for putting more labor into it? Or are you following the rule of capture? Because the first person to make contact with it was Potter, and he did it with his broomstick. But Potter doesn't actually cleanly secure the snitch. The question says it bounces off his broomstick and it gets tangled in Hermione's hair, which is kind of funny if you think about it, right? But is that a way of capturing? You're not using your hands, but is your hair kind of, an instrument of some sort, like a net maybe? But she expended no actual labor, kind of just fell into her head, right? Is that sufficient for rule of capture? Then it tells you a few seconds later, the snitch breaks free. So again, the natural liberty, Hermione did not deprive the animal of its natural liberty. It was still sort of at liberty to fly around and escaped her hair. Then it tells us it flies across the line onto Whiteacre. Okay, who owns Whiteacre? That's Ron's property. And the snitch starts digging into the ground. Again, if Ron owns Whiteacre, he owns all the soil below his ground. And Ron starts digging vertically. Okay, so far so good. The snitch changes direction, goes on a slant. He goes across onto the Greenacre, which is owned by Hermione. So now we're talking about the oil and gas cases. We're talking about trespass based on slant drilling because it's a fugitive resource. And Ron goes and captures the snitch. Goes and trespasses onto Hermione's property, which he cannot do. Finally, Ron catches the snitch. Again, he is trespassing onto her property. After the match, though, the judges the competition, the referees, give the award to Potter. I don't tell you why, but the presumption is because he was the first one to touch it with his broomstick, right? That's not in the question, but you can make that reasonable inference. So we always ask, what would the sportsman do, right? We actually know the hunters among themselves would give it to Potter for making first contact, even if he didn't cleanly capture it. I told you Ron, Hermione sue, and they want a quiet title. Quiet title means to assess who owns what. So I tell you, discuss the strongest claims. A lot of you didn't do that. The strongest claims for all three. You got to do all three. If you only do one of them, you're not getting full credit. But by the way, for all the questions, a lot of you didn't answer all three people. That's the easiest way to lose points. Answer the damn question, right? Answer the question. Answer the question. Please answer the question. If you don't answer the question, you'll get full credit. So, discuss the strongest claims for all three. All right. There are a lot of things you could have brought in here, right? We have cases about wild animals. You have Pearson v. Post. Again versus Rich with the whalers and their customs. Excuse me. Keeble, which was interference with the livelihood, right? Which was the hunting of the trapping of the ducks. Also, the fugitive cases. We have Papa versus Hayashi. I think the idea of that falling in her hair, then getting knocked out with the broom is actually somewhat similar to the Popov case. If you talk about Johnson versus McIntosh, you're wrong. I told you many times, many times, that's about discovery of land, right? Conquest of land. It's not relevant for fugitive wild animals. A lot of students talk about lost property like Armory and Hannah against Peel because it was in the ground, it was buried. Wrong. That stuff applies to chattels, not to fugitive resources. Again, the snitch was digging on itself. This is not like a ring that was lost. So we cited Johnson versus McIntosh or Armory or Hannah or McAvoy, Andros, Yules, Brigg, Gass. All wrong. No credit. I warned you many times, but people do it anyway. You should also talk about things like labor theory and rule of capture, right? Also, under Gen v. Rich, should the court defer to the rules of the profession, right? The rules of this tournament, right? Isn't that relevant, right? That these people have their own referees who decide or disputes. Why is the court even intervening? Okay. Some of you talked about rationing solely, right? If you have a wild animal on your property, does it belong to you? And in this case, the property actually wound up on Greenacre, which belonged to Hermione. Okay. A lot of you didn't discuss the fact that it got stuck in her hair and it was out of capture, right? It's not your hand. It's not really a net, but it's something like that. Okay. A general point, some of you, I was just looking quickly. I didn't read them all carefully. Did bullets. Don't do bullets. I want sentences. Please, sentences, full sentences. But if you want to separate them out, like one paragraph for Potter, one paragraph for Ron, one paragraph for Hermione, it helps me see that you're answering the question clearly, right? I think this is not just for my class. Your job is to make the reader's responsibility as easy as possible. You want it to be very easy. Oh, wow, I see this exam, right? If you give me a huge block of text and I can't see where one begins, one ends, I'm going to read it, but it's going to be annoying. So make it easier for me to read. Paragraphs are your friends. It doesn't hurt your word count to have extra spaces, right? It doesn't hurt your word count. Make it easy for me to read. People always ask, spelling. I mean, look, I don't need you to have perfect spelling, but if it's very sloppy and there's lots of typos, I'm going to say, wow, this is not a serious answer, right? It shows that either they rushed or they didn't know what they were doing or they ran out of time. So make it as easy for me to read as possible. The more work I have to do, really, it's bad for you. Right? I once had a paper a couple years ago. I don't know what this. The student thought that every space was a word or something. So basically, the entire 5 thing was just one paragraph, right? The entire answer was just a block, and I had no idea where one began, one ended. There wasn't. They didn't even write question 1. Period. There was nothing separating one question. I mean, I read it. I figured it out. It took me twice as long, right? Don't worry writing question 1 or 1. That's a word that's very important. You can spare a word for me just so I know where one begins, one ends. It makes my life a lot easier. All right. All right. Questions on number 1. I'll do the grading thing in a minute, but I want to also give you a chance to give some questions. Oh, Zoom's finally working. Look at that. Okay. Questions number 1, nothing? Yes, Zach.
For like, if you're gonna bring up pop-up versus Hayashi, can it go both ways? Like Ron would argue like the pop-up side of it, and then Hermione.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I think pop-up definitely cuts both ways, right? Is it the first person to break the momentum, so to speak, of the ball, or is the person who actually cleanly captures it? And you can go either way. Again, there's no one right answer to the exam. It's you're the lawyer for pop-up. You're the lawyer for Ron, Potter, and what the hell the other one's name is? Hermione. Make the best argument you can for your client, right? Again, answer the question. If a case majority, cite the majority. If the case dissent, cite the dissent, right? You can cite either one. That's all fair game. Any other questions, number 1? Is it also clear? Did you all get 100? No? Well, let's try this, right? So this is not, grading is a bit of an art, and this is why I'm somewhat hesitant to do this, but I think on balance it helps, right? When I grade your exams, I read them very carefully. I usually spend maybe 5 minutes per question, just it takes me a lot of time. But I try to distill at a high level what I'm looking for. So off the bat, there are very few 10s, right? In a section of 90 or 80 of you, I may give you maybe 1 or 2 10s. So you probably didn't get a 10, at least not for the midterm. But at least you can start at the 9, right? Then you have the 8, you have the 7, the 6, the 5, and the less than 5, you're in trouble, right? If you're getting less than 5, you're probably failing the exam. So I don't even really give the gradation. So if you miss everything below, it's a less than 5. If your exam was based on lost or mislaid property or discovery doctrine, you might get 5 or 6 points. If you talked about rule of capture sort of in the abstract but didn't really go to any of the cases, you might get 6 points. If you mention maybe 1 of the cases, maybe it's 7. 2 of the cases, maybe it's 8. If you want a 9, which is where I think a lot of you want to get to, you talk about cases, but also you talk about some of the policy implications of why rule of capture works, why the labor theory works, and you have the strongest claims for each, right? This is not perfect, but if you could, I'm putting the poll open, just put in a number from 1 to 10. Again, this is not going towards your final grade. This is only used for my usefulness. So when I meet with you in office hours, I have a sense of where you are. Because I don't want to Brianne's point, I want to make sure I'm working with the kids who need the help the most first. And I think that's a fair point. Thank you, Brian. I was thinking about it for like 3 days after you mentioned that. So I was trying to think of how best to do it. Okay. If this doesn't work, I'll abandon it. I won't do it again, but I'll see if this works for me. Yes.
Is there a good rule of thumb that you usually have 3 cases in the...
Well, it depends what the question's asking, but particularly for the Fox cases, for the animal cases, we have like 5 or 6 or 7, so there's a lot you can bring from. With future interest, there are no cases, so that rule wouldn't really govern the future interest. I'll show you the future interest questions in a minute, how to answer those. But hopefully, also by giving you this rubric, giving you honest advice of how you can do better. That's my goal. Yes. It's not just listing the names, it's actually talking about why this case is similar or different than what you did.
If you talk about
Cite the case name. You should. Yeah, I know some professors say don't cite case names. I will for life of me never understand that. In any brief read in any court, the case name's important, right? That's what you're citing. Every brief you read, there's a table of authorities where you list every case you cite. The reason, because case names are important. Right? Anyway, all right. I'm only about 50 of you, maybe another 10, 15. And be honest, and if you're not sure, err on the side of lower rather than higher. Don't like pad yourself, because this is not the place to lose yourself. If you're not sure, just go low. That's Jackie.
So I was thinking of the snitch as a wild animal and not necessarily a fugitive resource.
That's the same thing.
Oh, okay.
A wild animal is a fugitive resource.
Okay.
They're the same thing. Only getting 57. Are people not here? Is there some memo due or something? Spring break doesn't start today. I swear, I don't understand. You're paying so much money for a degree that you're missing classes for spring break. I'll never understand for the life of me. I don't get attendance that people miss class so much. It's just so many people. I saw people in class, the midterm, I haven't seen in weeks, right? It's what? People, I don't know. There. Yeah.
So rather than just talk about the rule and its applications, rather than going requires actual possession, you want us to cover the cases as well that applies to.
Well, that's where the rules come from, don't they?
Right, but if you listed a rule statement.
I don't want rule statements. If you're copying some for your notes, you're not getting credit. I've said that before. If you're just copying stuff for your notes, I am not giving you credit because that shows me you don't know anything. Right? I want you to answer the question and apply the rules to whatever I'm asking you. Make sense?
Yeah.
If you're just copying for your notes, you're getting no credit because that's an open book exam that doesn't show me you know anything. All right? All right, I only see 60 people. I'm going to stop it. We'll move on. Let's see. You guys are no way half of you got 8s, but I'll take it. It's sure 8 point. No decimals. There's whole numbers. I don't do. I appreciate that. No one got 5s. Well, that just tells people didn't answer it. Aren't giving honest assessments. Okay, maybe this won't work. Okay. Try it. See what goes. All right, but again, if you're not giving an honest assessment, then I can't help you. So it's really you're hurting yourself. All right, let's do question number 2. The average, by the way, the average score is about a 7. So with half of you putting 8s, it's unrealistic. But maybe this is a bad idea. I don't know. All right, or maybe you're just a super class. I don't know. That's all right. So we have this conveyance. After the ownership of the snitch is settled, Potter, Ron, and Hermione execute 3 conveyances. So there will be 3 questions involving future interests. Okay. So the first one says Potter transfers Blackacre to Ron for his life, comma. Then 1 year after Hermione provides Ron with a proper funeral, comma, to Hermione and her heirs. So this is similar. This is similar to the question we've done before at the funeral, but with a little bit of a twist because there's a 1 year gap. All right. So we start off. Potter gives Ron a life estate. Okay, that's the easy part. It's always the easy part. And we ask ourselves, what happens upon the death of Ron? Well, right away, nothing, right? It's impossible to do a funeral right away. And it's really impossible to do a funeral right away within a year. So for some period of time, Blackacre will have to go somewhere. And we draw the inference that it goes back to Potter, at least temporarily. So we say that Potter has a reversion, right? At least temporarily. But it's not a reversion in fee simple absolute. That reversion can be cut short. Cut short by whom? It can be cut short by Hermione. When? A year after Hermione gives a proper funeral. Maybe Hermione never gives the funeral. It's possible she never does it. Lazy, whatever. Doesn't get around to it. Maybe Hermione's dead. But she might. So we have a future interest that's going to cut short the interest of the grantor. So we have an executory interest, and it's going to be springing. So the full answer is that Ron has a present interest in life estate. I have it over here as well, so you can copy it down. So question number 2. Ron has a present interest in life estate. Potter has a future interest in reversion, subject to Hermione's springing executory interest. And then Hermione has a future interest in springing executory interest in the simple. Okay, very similar to the question we had in class. Now, a lot of you, well, not a lot of you, but some of you at least, wrote that there are alternate contingent remainders, right? Because you saw it's a future interest following the death, etc. I don't think that's the best answer because there's a gap of time, right? There's a gap of time after the death until the funeral can be had. And that's more consistent with an executory interest in reversion than contingent remainders. So I would give partial credit for the contingent remainders, but that's not full credit. Okay. Questions on number 2? Yes.
For executive limitations, you don't use the word condition, right? For like Hermione providing Ron with the funeral, is that not, you wouldn't want to use that word because it's not like a contingent remainder, so.
I mean, look, there's nothing wrong with saying condition, but if you say condition, you might confuse yourself and think it's a condition precedent. So I would avoid that word. It's not wrong, right? I'm not telling you that you're wrong, but I would avoid it. Yes, John.
So, without how far in depth for explaining each one, do you want us to say like, okay, reversion, and then give the definition you told us to memorize?
Well, it's not just giving a definition. You say the reason why this is a reversion is because it's a future interest that follows Ron's life estate terminating and then goes to a grantor. In this case, is Potter. In other words, this is perhaps the question before. If you just copy the rule statement for your notes, it doesn't tell me anything. You have to actually put the words into that statement to show me what you're talking about. It's a future interest that follows the termination of Ron's life estate and goes back to the grantor. In this case, it was a Potter. That's a good answer, right? And the reason why it's springing executory interest because it's a future interest that cuts short the interest of the grantor. In this case, it's Potter. Therefore, it's springing, right? If you're just copying a sentence verbatim from your notes, good luck. You're not getting full credit because anyone can do that open book exam. That doesn't show me anything. You have to work the facts of my question into your answer at every point. Understood? Yes, sir.
When we're calculating this for our grades, and like you say, like you give partial credit, is that when we do the decimal points, like 0.5?
I've never given partial credit before. I always give whole numbers. I don't think I've ever given a 6.5. It's always a whole number. Maybe I should. I don't know, but I don't do that. Grading's hard. It's actually. I spend a lot of time grading, thinking very carefully at every paper, and like what I actually do in my head, you're gonna think I'm nuts. Is I imagine when I'm grading your question, you're sitting right in front of me, and you say, Professor, why did I get a 7? And I say, here's the answer I'm gonna give this student. Every time I give her a grade on my spreadsheet, I do that thing in my head. And can I justify it? Now, I don't always remember when you go, why did I get it? I won't remember, right? But I do it at the moment because I have 100 and however many of 70 of you. But I try very hard to, can I justify the score if I would actually get the one I want that's sitting right in front of me? I try. Yes, Courtney.
So can you explain the condition, whether it was like condition precedent or subsequent?
Well, it doesn't matter. With an executory interest, it doesn't really matter if there's a condition precedent or subsequent, right? What matters is the future interest of the third part belongs to a third party cutting short the interest of the grantor, right? There's a reversion, and it's being cut short by by Hermione. That's a springing executory interest. This is why Zach's question was somewhat. I was dodging it a little bit. It doesn't really matter if it's precedent or subsequent for this one. The question is going to matter. Questions number 2. Going once, Twice. All right, let's try this again. Whole numbers only. I'll make sure I tell the next section the same thing. No 6.5. You don't get to do that. I didn't say it, which is perhaps unfair, but just give whole numbers. With again, if you didn't get anything right, you're in trouble. If you got stuff right, but you wrote contingent remainders, it might be a 5 or a 6, right? I mean, everyone gets the life estate right, so everyone starts with a 6, but that might be all you get. If you got 2 of the 3 interests correctly, you get a 7. If you get them all right correctly, that's an 8. What gets you to the 9s, you explain why, right? This should actually be, it's a reversion because of future interest after the termination of Ron's life estate going to a third party, or going to the grantor, you need to spell it out. I don't always give 10s on the sort of future interest question unless it really blows me away that you thought of something I didn't, but 9's good. All right, if you get a 9, you're in good shape. All right, let's try this, see how this goes. Again, whole numbers, please. Look at question number 2. Yeah, perfection is very rare. I've never given 100. It has never happened. 90s, mid-90s I've done, but never 100. Maybe one of you will break the record. I don't know. I got the prodigy in my midst. Okay, I got about 60 of you. Only 60 people here. Really, people with spring break. This is a very important class. This is why I don't grade the midterm anymore. You guys don't care, right? I used to spend so much time grading midterms, and people never pick them up. You know how frustrating it is? I would grade midterms, and people would never even bother going to pick them up. One semester, I tried something different where I didn't even give you your grades until I would write your grade on your paper. So if you wanted your grade, you have to come get it from me, and not from my secretary, from me. People didn't even pick up their exams. I'm at a loss. All right, let's see how we did. Wow, a lot of you think got 9s. That's never happened before, but sure. I've never usually there's only a couple 9s, but maybe you guys are all the geniuses, and you guys so prepared. Good, I like it. All right, 7. That's good. 6s. All right, we'll put a 5. I appreciate the honesty. All right, let's try number 3, please. All right, so this is also similar to a question we did in class. If you noticed, I mean, I am not that creative. Almost everything I give you is based on what we did in class. This is not like I'm making stuff up out of thin air. The way I write in exam questions, I go through my lecture notes, and I think, oh, I like that question. Let me try and change it a little bit. So it's nothing that you haven't seen before, just it's similar. All right, so this question says, Ron transfers Whiteacre to Potter and his heirs, comma. But if Potter does not graduate from Hogwarts College, comma, then to Hermione and her heirs. All right. So a lot of people look and say, oh, but if, that means it's a fee simple subject condition subsequent, but that's wrong. Right? Why is that wrong? Because the future interest goes to a third party. Right? The future interest goes to a third party. Okay. Moreover, if you look at the conditional language, it comes after the comma. The but if comes after the comma. So this cannot be fee simple subject condition subsequent. That cannot be right. Okay. So we have here is Potter and Hermione. Potter is a fee simple, but it's subject to an executory limitation. Hermione has a future interest in executory limitation. Is it shifting or springing? It's shifting. So we say that Potter has a fee simple subject to Hermione shifting executory interest, and Hermione has a future interest in shifting executory interest in fee simple. Now, if you look at the question, it says the interests are Potter, Ron, and Hermione. I bet a lot of you skipped Ron, didn't you? You didn't even mention Ron, but that's the question. So you lose a point for that. Ron has no interest. You need to tell me Ron has no interest, right? That's an important point because that won't always be the case. Depending how you read the question differently, Ron might actually have an interest here in reversion somewhere. So always, again, I hate to beat the drum. Answer the damn question, right? Answer the question I'm asking you. Answer it carefully. and go through each point in the question. You lose a point in the table. You might have a perfect answer, and you lose a point because you don't talk about Ron. All right. Questions on number 3. Yes.
When you're writing out the full conveyance, does it matter if you put like the fee simple behind the shifting executory limitation, or can you put it in front of it? Like, can
If you
say-
just say what you're saying, I'm not sure what you're saying. Just say it out
Is
loud.
it wrong if you said future interest in fee simple and shifting executory limitation?
No, I don't think that's correct, actually.
Okay.
I think it has to be a future interest in shifting executory limitation, fee simple. And the reason why is that fee simple describes what happens eventually. It should come at the end of the sentence, not the beginning. Questions on number 3. Let's try this. So here's my rubric for number 3. Again, it's very similar to number 2, but make sure you have that Ron has no interest. You're not getting full credit unless you do. Or someone's going to ask, wait, what if I explained why I didn't mention Ron? You might be capped at a 7, maybe an 8, right? The grading is also fluid because people mix and match. They do some stuff better than others. Maybe they explain 2 of them, but not the 3rd. So often it's hard picking a number. I do my level best to try to find it. But again, if you're doing this exercise now, err on the side of lower than higher. Okay. Any questions? For those of you who are on spring break right now, hello, welcome. Hope Cancun is fun. We are sitting in chilly Houston. It's about 50 degrees out. Cancun. I know where people even go. I've never gone to spring break in my life. Anything else? All right, let's try this again. So question 3, just please put your numbers in. Whole numbers, please. Integers, if you remember from math. You know, we have a calendar committee, which sounds very boring, but it's very important, right? So the ABA requires you to have a certain number of class days. But some days are just never popular. So for example, the Monday before Thanksgiving, right? People don't come to that class. They consistently skip it. So we have this class schedule that no one comes to. We basically lose a day. If you have a Monday, Wednesday class. So a proposal we considered, and ultimately we're probably not going to adopt, is we kill Labor Day. And you finish by Thanksgiving. You don't come back after Thanksgiving. You have the entire time off. I would favor that, but apparently a lot of people have weddings and parties in Labor Day, so they don't want to do that. So in other words, we lose days in the calendar that people just are never going to be here for. You can also shrink a reading day, have fewer reading days for the exam, but then you compress it as well. We have so many meetings on the calendar. It's actually very hard to manage. There's no good answer because no matter what you do, you upset some people. You say, oh, compress the grading schedule. Well, then we can't grade as many exams. And then we have to do more multiple choice and essay, which makes it harder to evaluate you, right? So there's less time to grade. We just get lazy and say, okay, well, multiple choice it. Do a Scantron in 5 seconds. But then we don't have time for feedback. There's no winning. There's no winning. And law professors, we don't have unlimited time. I think we do. We have finite time like everyone else. All right, let's see what we got. Okay, that was a little more realistic, I think. Yeah, okay. All right. I appreciate those who are giving honest scores. I do, because this will help me find you and help you make things better. I hope. It's not always like I'm not God, right? I can't just beam information to your brain, but I hopefully can help you maybe tweak study habits to get better. All right. Anything else? Number 3. Yes.
You say Hermione has a future interest in shifting.
Sorry again. If you say what?
If you say Hermione has a future interest in shifting executory limitation from decent to absolute.
That's correct.
Yeah, no, would you have to say Ron has an interest or have an interest though? Because it's saying that she has an interest.
I would still like to say Ron has no interest. Yeah. Answer the question. Don't try to skate around it. All right, anything else? Number 3. All right, so it's going okay. I think it's going all right. Yeah. If you don't like it, tell me later. You don't have to give me an honest opinion. I thought this the other day. I'm like, this might be a way to do it, and I never know. It's funny, you know, with your experiments, you never get to see like the results because you're out of class. You never have me again. But next semester we'll learn. Let's try number 4, please. I think there's also a future interest. Yeah. Okay. And usually in the midterms, I have 2 or 3 future interest questions. The final exam about the same. So if this is a rough area for you, it's not going anywhere. You have to remember this in a month. You can't forget it. It comes back to haunt you. It says Hermione transfers Greenacre to Potter for life, comma. Then to Ron's children, comma. But if Ron fails to graduate from Hogwarts College, comma, to Potter's heirs. Ooh. And I tell you that Ron has 1 child. That's an important fact. So we start off, of course, Potter's a life estate. Why is it important? There's a future interest for Potter's heirs, right? Potter's heirs cannot be determined until Potter's dead. Be very careful if the future interest is Potter's heirs, not Potter and his heirs. I can mess with you and tell you there's a future interest for someone's heirs and they're still alive. You need to know that can't work, right? That's not going to work. And you have to be able to just spot that. Because I've done that before in exams where I trick you on that. No one is heirs till they're dead. There is 1 living child. Okay? So your future interest after the termination of Potter's life estate to a third party. That's a remainder. Is it vested or contingent? Well, there's no condition precedent. And there's 1 living child, so it's ascertained. So the remainder is vested. But it's vested remainder that's subject to open because more children can be born into the class. All right? As we've discussed, if there's a vested remainder, even if Ron's living child, only a child dies, the heirs of that child will get the future interest, the remainder. So it stays in that bloodline. Okay? Now, some of you saw, but if, right? The but if comes after the comma, right? There's not a condition precedent. So still, this is remainder that's vested. I trick you on that every time. But if Ron fails to graduate from Hogwarts College, to Potter's heirs. Again, it's not Ron's children, it's Ron. But what ends up happening is that Potter's heirs can cut short, right? Potter's heirs can cut short the interest of Ron's children. So Potter's heirs have a future interest in shifting executory interest in fee simple. And Ron's children have a vested remainder in fee simple, subject to open. Here, I'll put it on the screen so everyone can see it. Subject to open. Subject to Potter's heirs shifting executory interest. Now, some of you thought that Hermione has a future interest in reversion. She doesn't. It's either going to go to the children of Ron or to Potter's heirs. Hermione will have nothing. But the question asks, what are the interests for all 4 of them? If you didn't get Hermione, again, it's just as a point off, I can take off very easily because you can answer the question. And so to summarize, Potter's a life estate. Ron's children has their vested remainder in fee simple, subject to open, subject to Potter's heirs shifting executory interest, and you need to spell each reason. Why is it a remainder? Why is it a vested remainder? Why is it a vested remainder subject to open? And why is it subject to the shifting executory interest? Right? There's 4 different questions you have to answer to even get this one sentence correct. You need to walk through each of those steps. That's why I know you get full credit. Right? So when I say identify, it's not just list them, explaining them, I want you to explain why. That's where you get all of your credit from. Okay? All right, questions on number 4. Yes, sir.
For Ron's children, at the end of the sentence, I put that it was subject to Potter's executory interest, but I didn't say shifting. But then on Potter's heirs, Potter's heirs shifting executory interest. But I didn't put shifting on Ron's children's sentence, but I did on.
Right. I mean, it's not full
Potter's
credit.
heirs.
It's not full credit. That is a point. Right. I mean, again, When you have executory interest, that's a mirror matrix, that's a match. So whatever's on one side, it's going to be on the other side. Right, which is why, again, the grading is tricky because not everyone fits into these rubrics perfectly. They're just sort of rough estimations. This is why I don't do decimals, because I'm going insane trying to figure out 4.2 and 6.5. It would blow my head up. But you have to pick a number. You got to pick. I mean, yeah, you got to pick a number. That's the answer. If you're any sort of athletic sport, there's a number. All right, what's your number? Cucumber. It's like a thing when you're a kid. Like, what's your number? Cucumber. Remember that? No. No. All right, I think it's about everybody. It's working, I think, better than I thought. I thought it'd be a disaster, but I remember years ago when I took driver's ed, there was a question. It was like, people were asked, "Are you a better than average driver?" And like most people say, "Yes, I'm better than average," which can't be true because not everyone can be above average, and people are below average. So if you ever watch, Lake Wobegon effect, where everyone is above average, right? It's not possible. You can't all be above average, but yeah, curves are natural. That's what they call natural curves. Every group curves naturally. All right, let's see what we got. All right, a little bit down to earth here. Okay. Yeah, this is more realistic. Okay. All right. It's also the case with timing that as you get towards the end, the grades drop. It happens every year. I see this when I see people rushing. I see there are more typos. There's more, I can sense when a person's rushing because it's not as clean. And so, like, answer number 1 might be like this, and answer number 5 is like this, like 2 sentences, because obviously they ran out of time. So people are smiling. I can see it's crazy, but on the exam software, it actually tells me what time you began, what time you ended, so I can see who left early, and then who went till the bell, and I can see where it crashes on time. All right. Any other questions on number 4? All righty, let's do number 5. Number 5 is what I call the sort of policy question, which is perhaps not a good name, but it's only the best name I can think of, where I give you some sort of a big issue to think about, right? And there are logs I can give you, right? I mean, if you go through my old exams, I never run out. But a policy question doesn't mean you forget everything you've learned. It's not just, well, this is a good idea because it's fair or whatever, right? There are authorities you can bring in, right? There are things we've talked about that affect these issues. All right, so the question says, number 5, with respect to present and future interests, American property law is premised in large measure on English feudal law, right? The stuff that you guys all hate, right? Though feudalism was abolished centuries ago, American courts still abide by these rules. And I have a quote that's from the very beginning of your chapters in your reading. It says, Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr., by the way, the most overrated justice ever, right? Overrated. He was not that good. He gets way too much credit. Him and Marshall, way overrated. It's true. Thurgood, that is. John, not Thurgood. John Marshall. Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr. wrote, "It is revolting to have no better reason for a rule than was laid down at the time of Henry IV." Okay. And the question is, discuss both why Holmes is right and wrong. Even italicizes the word "and." If you only give me half the answer, you're getting partial credit. You're not getting your full credit. You guys do both. Which is why, again, I don't really care what you think. I want you to argue both sides. You're lawyers. Congratulations. You have viewpoints. I don't care what they are. Argue both sides. I really don't care what your opinion. I mean, I care, but I don't really. I want to see if you can do both sides. That's my goal. Okay, so you do the strengths and weaknesses of our property system. Focus on one side or the other. You're not getting yourself full credit. So a couple ways to sort of think about this, right? One, for weaknesses, that's kind of easier. When the reason for a rule no longer exists, maybe the law no longer exists itself. And a lot of cases we've read were critical of, requiring delivery of sizing, right? Why is that something that we have? Think of like maybe state for shack or the other case. Like, why do these very strict property doctrines that are based on these formal boundary lines? Primogenitor, right? Firstborn male. A lot of these rules really have no place for modern society. On the other side, we have stability and certainty in the law, right? Pearson v. Post and Gambie Rich talk about custom and tradition, and having something you can rely on really does matter. Also, another question we've talked about: who should be responsible for changing rules? Is it going to be the courts or maybe the legislature? These rules are so bad that the government can come in and change it, not for the courts to change. There are a lot of ways that you can take this question, and it's often hard for me to give you a rubric for it because they're so broad. There's the Cardozo passage we read in class about why we have these things, right? There are a lot of things you can bring in. All right. Questions on your mind? Number 5. This is usually the lowest score on a question in the exam without fail. That happens every year. It's true. These are usually questions that we sort of, one second, Ben. We usually talk about in class. So sort of like rewarding people who incorporate into their knowledge the class discussions.
I just wonder, I know you're gonna hate this question, but in terms of like in-depth analysis, because on my midterm, I found myself having to go back and try and shorten up my other answers to try and get enough information into this last one. I was just wondering if you could shed any light on strategy you would recommend.
Well, so I'm happy to take the question, not a bad question. If you know your word limit is 2,000, right? Sorry, 1,000 words. Then you're writing about 200 words per question. And don't think you're at a disadvantage because everyone else is the same limit. So you can't fit so much in 200 words, right? I would, at least in this question in particular, have 100 words on strength, 100 words on weaknesses, right? Try and actually divvy your time up evenly. And try to think of what authorities you could bring in, right? It's not so much whether you think it's good or bad. Again, I really don't care. It's maybe make a list of your notes of what are the different authorities you can bring in that talk about this, and maybe a sentence or two for each authority, right? You can sort of game it out in different levels. And what I'm getting at is the way to practice for this exam is to practice for the exam, to take old exams and write out answers for yourself. Don't just read the model answer, which is not always right. Yeah, the model answer is not always right. Don't even rely on it, right? But actually trying to write out answers for yourself in time and see if you can do it in the limit. If you take those steps, you're in good shape, right? The students who struggle, those who don't, just show up sort of cold and don't do it. But if your problem is you can't get it within the word limit, I can work with you and help you. It's the students who aren't even able to write something to get up to square one. Is there a question you're on? Ask it. Other thoughts on number 5? Yes, Alex.
How important is studying cases in the policy question?
You should, right? Because again, this is someone asked the question before. Every class we study cases, right? Except for the feature interest, that's probably the outlier. If you learn something, it's probably from a judge, what they wrote, right? Which is wonderful. It's lovely that you have thoughts, but I want to know what the authorities are.
If you cite like for example, I didn't cite the case, but I cited like the philosopher and stuff that we learned.
That's an authority. You're allowed to for Pufendorf, and the fairness labor theory, because that's absolutely fair game. Right, we studied that in the Pearson case, but he was a real person. I know he is. Other questions, number 5. All right, so our scores are like. Here's the rubric that I put together. And the rubric for number 5 is always very tricky. And again, it's not, I hope you appreciate from this class something else. Grading is a very tough science, right? If I was, I could just do multiple choice and make this really easy on myself, multiple choice. I think it's unfair. But then that makes it much harder to objective. So you'll see my rubric here is not the best. Again, if you got nothing, just you're less than 5, you gotta come see me. You're sort of in the ballpark, right? You're just talking about issues related, but that ain't really authorities. Okay, I'll give you 5 points. If you do one or the other, but not both, you're probably the 6, maybe a 7 range. If you do both, 7. Bring in some authorities, 1 or 2 authorities, get to an 8 or 9, and then again, a few people get 10s. I almost never do a 10 the last question, which is doesn't happen unless you blow me with something I never thought of before. But just 10s are rare. All right, see where you guys fall out. Okay. All right. I think I just read everybody. All right. Now I'm going to ask you to do some math. I'm sorry. Add together, please, the 5 scores to get a total. So a perfect score is 50. An imperfect score is 0, I suppose. And give me what your total score is. I'll give you the distributions in a bit where I think the grades fall. This also makes my life, now you're basically inserting your grades into my records, which makes it very easy. So I had this idea. Grade keeping is very tricky, and there's transposition errors when you're copying stuff from one to the other. There's errors. So this actually puts the burden on you to do it correctly. Okay. Okay, there's so few more people. Okay, take your time if you're adding up. All right. I think I'm waiting for about 60 people. I get another 5 seconds. I'll call it quits. All right. I got everyone. We'll stop it here. All right. This was the distribution from when I originally had this midterm. It's not perfect, but this gives you a sense of where you would fall. These aren't, are they sorted? Can I sort these? I can sort these. All right. That's about normal. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's not, again, I think you probably were all a little generous with yourselves. But that's fine. I expect it to be higher than average. That is actually, to be perfectly frank, a pretty natural curve. You see that kind of goes like this? Yeah, that actually worked. I didn't, Brian, thank you. I didn't think it actually works. It actually works surprisingly well. I have no idea if stuff will work. I have to try it out. So look, if you're over 40, you're in good shape. 40 points, I mean 40 years, right? I'm almost there, right? If you're over 40 points, you're in pretty good shape. It means you're in the A or A plus territory. 45 is usually about where the A plus is. That's actually, yeah, I mean, usually you go to 45, that's about the A plus. 38 to 39 is usually the A minus range, usually just about close to 40. B plus is about 36, 37, which is where a lot of you fell, yeah. B is around 30 to 35. B minus is 31, 32. The C plus is about a 28 to 30. All right. And then below 26 and 25 to talk. So I think what I'm going to do, if you got below I think I'll just say C plus or lower, you'll be prioritized. I'll send an email with these instructions. I have to see how my other class does. But I think if you're basically C plus or lower, or if you didn't put your score here for whatever reason, that's fine. That'll be probably priority. So what I might do next week on Zoom is I might just have like the first day. I got stuff on Monday. I can't do Monday. But maybe the first day, Tuesday, to have like maybe just the entire day the people below a certain threshold, and the other days others. I'm not sure. I have to give it some thought. But it'll be basically probably next Tuesday, next Wednesday, next Thursday, and if Friday if needed. I don't know. See how many people show up. I don't know. For those of you who are in Cancun, hello. Zoom works in Cancun, but this is your shot. Again, it becomes very difficult when I have 40 people on my office hours during the week because I can't see everyone. I like these meetings to be 20 or 30 minutes in length, right? I actually want to get to know you and talk to you and figure out what's going on in your life, not just like giving you a score. Your scores are here. You got your scores, which is why I could stay out of the way. So if I did, again, 30 minutes with all of you, it would take me like 2 months, which we obviously don't have. It's not productive. It's like, why did you see him first? So I'm going to try to prioritize those who I think need to help the most. Okay. All right. Questions on... Actually, we finished pretty early. If any of you who are in that ballpark want to come see me now, we can finish a little bit early. Maybe only maybe one person, 10 o'clock. Oh, what time's your next class? Oh, yeah. Oh, that's some time. All right, so you know what? Any more questions now? Let me see how many I can get done today. So if you're in that ballpark, the sort of the C+ or lower, or maybe B- or lower, I'll be in my office. Come on by, we can chat. Again, I know you have class at noon or 12:20. That's fine. We can wrap at noon, but maybe I can see 3 or 4 people and that, at least get that out of the way. All right. Any other questions? All right, this one, actually, thank you, Brandon. This actually went better than I thought. It was actually useful. All right. Yeah, not for Brianna, thank you. Okay. All right, I'll see you guys later. Thanks so much. 6:23, I'll go upstairs.